it's Writing Wednesday, and I'm here behind my desk at work at the Murphy Center where I teach, which is my day job, to talk to you about whether you should quit your day job, or if you're a young aspiring writer who's thinking about what your career is going to look like, whether you should get out there and get a day job. Don't quit your day job is one of those things that people often say jokingly to people whose artistic pursuits are maybe not as talented as they think they are. Like if you can't carry a tune, don't quit your day job and go become a singer. But interestingly, quit your day job is a piece of advice you often hear, even if not in exactly those words directed at writers. More specifically, I guess, it's not even so much advice as that it features so prominently in some writers' success stories. And then when I came into the money, or when I married the rich person, or when I had saved up enough, or when I just had no idea how I was going to pay the bills but took a leap of faith, I was able to quit my day job and finally write my book. I come across this being presented over and over as though it's the one paradigm for what you have to do if you want to be successful as a writer. First, quit your day job. I really disagree with this for a lot of reasons. Now, that's not to say if you have the means to quit your day job and you really want to, say your day job is sapping your strength and energy and creativity and you don't like it and you've figured out a way to pay the bills without having to go out to work every day and you really feel you need all that time to devote to your writing, don't let me stop you. But if you're in a position where you have to have a day job, don't feel that that's going to bar you from being a creative writer. I have worked as a teacher virtually my entire writing life, except for a 7-year period when my kids were being born and being small, as kids do, and I stayed home. And I decided during those years I could, whatever time I could spare from parenting, I would devote to my writing, and I would contribute to the family income by freelance writing. Now, I'm not going to say this is a bad idea. In fact, it worked extremely well for me. I hooked into a few good freelance gigs during those years. Not to brag, but I think I'm a pretty good freelancer in that I'm able to work very quickly, take instruction well, and distance myself from the work and not obsess over whether it's perfect or not, just focus on giving the client what they want. With that in mind and a bunch of really good contacts, I was able to make about $100 an hour freelancing, which worked for me. I was never able to accumulate enough work to come up with anything like, 30 to 40 hours worth a week. So, it wasn't as great an hourly rate as it sounded when you saw how much of it I was actually doing. But the thing that really struck me when I was doing the freelancing was that, I was pretty much full-time parenting, and then in the hours when my kids were asleep or were being looked after by a family member, I was putting most of my writing time into these freelance jobs, which were occasionally interesting, but very often less interesting than my own creative work, and sometimes downright tedious. I never had it as hard as my writer friend who once had to write a quality control manual for a meat rendering plant, which I think is the absolute nadir of freelance jobs. But I certainly had to do things that were not writing novels, and I was still writing novels, but I was fitting that in around the other writing. I think for me a real breaking point came when I had one of those really awful soul-sucking freelance jobs, which every freelancer, not just in writing but in any field, has had at one time or another, where the client is completely unable to communicate to you what it is they want, except that every draft you turn into them isn't clearly not it. And after several months of working on this project and pouring in far more hours than my usual hourly rate would justify, I realized this is actually much less fun than teaching and is not paying me as well. And that happened at about the time that my kids were becoming school age and I was trying to face that decision of, am I going to go back to teaching or am I going to be a full-time writer? For me, teaching was the better option. I don't think I'm a focused enough writer that even if money did start falling out of the sky, I could actually sit down and produce fiction for 8 hours a day. I think I need to be mixing it up and doing other things. And if I'm going to be doing other things, they may as well be the things that I find creatively fulfilling. I would even argue that for at least some writers, and I'm definitely one of them, a day job is actually an asset. Some people definitely work well with huge chunks of time and minimal distraction. That's not my best working method, but you have to know what works for you. But also, I need other stimulation. I need to be encountering people and interesting situations and real-life problems, all of which my teaching work gives me, in order to feed the creative well of my writing. And that isn't always a direct connection. I mean, it's not that I go to work and teach my students all day and then go home and write stories about them at night. There's something about the constant contact with different types of people and the different type of thinking that teaching requires me to do that is actually good for me as a writer. All of this is just to say, as with everything I say about writing, you have to find what works for you. With the thing about a day job, though, you don't always have that luxury. Many of us do not have wealthy spouses, rich patrons, or large family inheritance, and so really you have to have some kind of a day job. Whether it's a writing-related job like freelancing of some kind, or whether it's teaching, or whether it's waiting tables, or whether it's being a neurosurgeon, or whatever it is. I guess what I want to say basically is just, if you have to have a day job, whether it's writing-related or not, don't feel that that's the end of your writing career, or that you can never write your novel until you quit your job and have endless amounts of time at your disposal. You can definitely write in around the edges of other work. I've always done it. Lots of other writers do it. The writer who makes a livable income from their creative work alone is in a tiny minority. Most writers are doing something else to produce an income, and it's not necessarily the death of your writing career or dream. So please don't cling to that belief that you'll write your novel someday when everything else in your life is out of the way. Writing your novel, or your poetry, or your memoir, or whatever it is you're writing, is something that you're going to fit into the rest of your life if you want to do it badly enough, and I really, really hope you will.